We are live. Welcome back. We got part 2 of mobility. Yesterday was the causes. Today is going to be correctives to improve hip extension. So if you failed that last screen, sorry, it's okay. You're going to be all right. You're going to live. I'm going to go over how you improve that and pass it. So again, we broke down 3 muscles for your hip flexors: psoas, iliacus, and rectus femoris, numbered on the side. The order that I like to do to address the muscles, to treat the muscles, muscle love, if you will, is 1, first, push. What is pushing, you ask? It's pushing / smushing. Say that 10 times fast. Or as we say down south, mashing. What you're doing is, if you visualize that muscle fiber like a rope. If I've got a knot in that rope, I can't just stretch and pull that out. I have to release that knot. You've probably heard the word trigger point before. Small little contraction in the muscle fiber that will not let go. To release that first, push, deep sustained pressure. So I'm going to go over first how to prep up the muscle before stretching it. And then second is pull. And that's what your typical, what you think of for static stretching, where you're just holding at its end range of motion. So what you're going to do first is identify the psoas muscle. What you do is you go between your belly button and that hip pointer in the front. If you draw a line between those two, split it right down the middle. And you'll see here, that's where that is. When you're putting this ball, place that ball right in the middle of that. Take a dumbbell, kettlebell, weight, and you're going to press that on top, like you'll see here in a second in the video. And what that's going to do is you want to angle it in towards your psoas, towards your spine. So what you can do from there is then, while applying and sustaining that deep pressure, that's therapeutic in and of itself, we can move and rotate that muscle underneath it. So back to that whole knot, I'm holding, I'm pressing on the knot, and I'm just taking the rope and flossing it underneath. By rotating the hip in and out, I'm able to release that muscle. Number 2, iliacus, another one of your hip flexors. For this, I usually use my hand. I call it the cheeseburger grip, but you'll notice how we angled inwards towards the spine for the psoas. This one we're angling out. So you still identify that hip pointer on the front of the hip, the ASIS. Look back to how we activate the core. You should be familiar by now with how to identify this. And from there, apply a purchase, reinforcing the hands, and I'm pressing or pushing out. Again, just taking the hip, rotating in and out while applying that sustained deep pressure. If you have never done this before, never felt this, if this is involved, it's extremely tender and it's extremely effective for improving hip extension. But finally, for the pushing, we got the rectus femoris, the one of the 4 quads that crosses the hip, the only one. So this is important. I just like to use, I got a wooden spoon here. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You could use a remote control, wooden spoon, muddlers, doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be super expensive. In order to release the muscle, it's easier when it's off, when it's not contracted, when it's not firm. So what I'm doing is I'm going to be taking my leg through that motion of bending and straightening, but my other leg's doing the work. If I just actively kick up and down and activate that rectus, it's hard to release it because it's working. So by keeping it relaxed, you'll notice when I find that tender spot, the only time I'm moving it is to identify that tender spot, then I'm holding. Deep, sustained pressure. 60 to 90 seconds, new person. To make it more effective, taking that muscle underneath while applying that pressure. So you'll notice here in the video is my other leg is actually doing the work and the muscle is off. So now that we pushed it, we released it, now let's stretch it. Now this is your typical, your more traditional static stretches where we're holding for about 30 seconds at or near that end range. Come out of it, 10 seconds. So we don't separate it out with this. It's called your iliopsoas. You'll notice that you've got the psoas, the iliacus, they come down, they have different origins, but they have the same insertion. So we want to make sure what we're avoiding, just like with the test, is leaning forward. Also make sure you're not arching your back. You should feel this stretch in the upper part of the front of your thigh. To get the rectus femoris, this is extremely important, you have to add the element of knee flexion in addition to the hip extension to get it, because it's a 2-joint muscle. An option, if it doesn't feel good to kneel down, is you can use a ball. I'm getting extension and knee flexion to get that rectus femoris. So the other ones were for the muscles, so we already went over those. There's also what's called a capsule. Every joint is two bones come together. There's like saran wrap that goes around it that helps keep fluid in. That saran wrap can become tight. So joints prefer more what we call dynamic movements, where we're going into the range and out, in and out, less of that static hold. So for here, I'm doing reps. I'm gonna do 3 sets of 10. I'm gonna translate my body forward, which is extending my hip because I'm limited. This is for the capsule. I'm also with my hand facilitating this forward move to further try to stretch out the front of the capsule. Again, another alternate, if you don't want to kneel down, is using a ball, using a chair, something on a roller, and just repeatedly sliding back, trying to open up that hip. So how this works in the clinic and in real life, you do the test, you fail it. You work on these, and if you're doing one, you're like, I feel like I'm doing it right, but I don't feel restricted, I don't feel a stretch. It might not be that one. Try a different one. Try all of them. But when you're doing this, how you'll know you're being effective is redo the test. Don't just assume. If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, please drop them below. I hope you found this helpful. Next up, we're going to have stability or strength causes of low back pain.